The next speaker is going to be Joe Lombardo, who's a longtime anti-war activist going back to the 60s. And right now he's National Coordinator of United National Anti-War Coalition, the largest anti-war coalition in the country. He's participated in recent delegation to Waziristan, did I pronounce that correctly? Pakistan?
General, but Waziristan.
To protest U.S. drone bombings. So, Joe, take it away.
Thank you, Mark. Basically what I want to do is talk a little bit about why an anti-war activist is speaking on a panel of civil liberties. And the short answer to that question is the one that Michael just said, which is you can't have imperialism abroad and democracy at home. And that's the short answer. UNAC is a fairly new organization that was formed at a conference up in Albany of about 800 people in July of 2010. And one thing we did a little different than some of the other anti-war coalitions at that conference is we took a strong stand against the attacks that were coming down on the Muslim community throughout the United States. And the Albany folks who were a host were able to interject that into UNAC, into the conference, because we had a lot of experience in Albany with attacks that were coming down on the Muslim community. The first attack that I was involved in was my local group up there. I'm from Albany. It was a long subway ride down here. My local anti-war group was called Bethlehem Neighbors for Peace. And there was a man and his wife that worked in that group. He was an imam. He was Imam Umar. Umar, his name was. His wife was Elsa. And he was the chief chaplain for all the New York State courts, for all the denominations. In fact, he was the first Muslim chaplain in the entire country. They didn't have any Muslim chaplains in the prisons until after the Attica Rebellion. And after the Attica Rebellion, they realized that 20% of their population was Muslim, so maybe they should have some Muslim chaplains, and Imam Umar became one of the first. He and one other person were the two first chaplains, Muslim chaplains. And he advanced over 25 years and became the head of all the chaplains. But after 9/11, he was an anti-war activist. He was a member of my organization. He would speak out. He would say things like, well, you know, I'm against what happened at 9/11, of course, but okay. But if you really want to end terrorism, what you need to do is you need to change U.S. foreign policy. That's the way to do it. Now, that was verboten. That could not happen. You couldn't have a black man and a Muslim saying that after 9/11. So they went after him. And a reporter for the Wall Street Journal came up to Albany and interviewed him. And he said, "Oh, this is great. You know, you're the first Muslim chaplain, a black reporter." And they did a huge article on him. Front page, you know, they don't do pictures in the Wall Street Journal, but they had a sketch, went on to some other page and so forth. And what the article was saying he was building for jihad in the prisons, and he supported the 9/11 attacks. They couldn't get a single quote, although they had tapes from him, they had manuscripts from books, they had books he had written, they had articles he had written. They couldn't find a single quote where that was happening. But yet they said this, because there was this period after 9/11 where they tried to say that they were building jihad in the prisons. So he was the first Muslim in the Albany area that was attacked. And because he was a part of our anti-war group, we came behind him and we fought that attack. And it was fairly successful. He was fired from all his jobs and so forth, and they didn't know how to get him in prison, because from speaking, you're not supposed to go in prison. He didn't say anything else. So they eventually discovered he had a shotgun and a .22 rifle. Now, first of all, you have to know that everybody in upstate New York has these things. They carry them around in the back of their pickup trucks and things like this. But he'd also been a farmer. And these are things he had for 25 years. But he had been arrested 45 years prior in the Bronx. And that was a federal crime now. And they went after him and tried to put him in jail for 10 years. So we mobilized. We had busloads of people come down from Albany. We got some of the Muslim community from New York. Imam Talib, who is today the head of the Muslim Leadership Council in New York City, where there are, by the way, are 500,000 Muslims that live in this city. He supported it, and we'd pack the courtrooms and so forth, and we basically won what I think is a victory there. Rather than 10 years, he got 1 year of home confinement. And then he stood up and said, I'm not going to wear that bracelet on my ankle. He said, I have a young child at home, and for me, that's a shackle. For me and for him, that is a throwback to slavery. I'm not going to wear that. And the judge said, okay. He was told he could leave the house for religious reasons, for work reasons, and for medical reasons. So he served that sentence, and we considered that a victory. But a number of other people in the Albany area started getting attacked. A pizza owner, someone said they heard him give an anti-American stand from across the street. They took him, they arrested him. He was in the Metropolitan Detention Center. He was eventually deported to Jordan. He had an American wife and an American son. This country with family values broke that family up. Answar Mahmoud, who was a student, was taking pictures around the city. They confiscated his camera, saw he had a picture of a reservoir outside of Albany. And they said, maybe he's planning to attack that reservoir. They put him in jail for 2 years. They couldn't get anything on him. They eventually deported him. But there was a number of other cases in upstate New York. But the main one that we got involved with was a case of the imam of a mosque up there. His name was Yassim Araf, and another member of that mosque whose name was Muhammad Hussein. They went after these people, and they used a model that they've used around the country to put hundreds and hundreds of Muslims in jail this way. We call it preventive detention. They went and they put a spy, a provocateur in the mosque, and this was a man who had something against him. He was selling illegal licenses to immigrants. And so they said they were going to deport him or put him in jail unless he turned and worked for the FBI. So he went into to this place, and basically he helped frame and Imam Aref and Hussein. Both of them went up to one of these CMUs, they're called, Communication Management Unions. We call them Muslim prisons, because they put Muslims in these places, and they're basically harsh types of prisons where there's lack of communication with anybody else on the outside. In fact, CCR has a case against these, and Imam Aref is one of their lead defendants in this case. So at the end of the UNAC conference, what we did was we marched the conference through the Albany community to this mosque and held a rally at this mosque. And this was something the Muslims in the community hadn't seen before, all these anti-war activists. Now, a lot of people in the anti-war movement thought it was wrong that we took up the case of the Muslims in this way. They thought it would hurt the anti-war movement because basically they understood there was prejudice in this country. The reason they were attacking Muslims was to build up a kind of Islamophobia, to build up a case against Muslims so they could build a case for war against Islamic countries. And that's why the anti-war movement had to be part of this. But they understood that there was prejudice in people's minds. People looked at Muslims askance. They looked at them as terrorists. They looked at them in these bad ways, and they thought, well, this was going to hurt the anti-war movement. So some anti-war groups pulled back from this. But UNAC took this up took this as an important fight. You know, remember Park 51? There was the big controversy that they had around here. They were building this Islamic community center downtown Manhattan, and a lot of people said we shouldn't do that. It was near the Twin Towers, all this kind of stuff. They held some demonstrations against it. This racist Pam Geller organized these demonstrations. We organized a demonstration when she was organizing a demonstration on 9/11 against it. We organized a demonstration a couple of blocks away. Ours was bigger than hers. Had we not organized that demonstration, the news media would have said, the people have come out against this mosque. The fact that we did, and they had to admit that ours was even larger, said there were some people for it and some people against it. And that changed the political character there. But the speech I gave there was, I talked about that poem that people know from Pastor Neumahler, I think he was called, from the Nazi era, where first they came for the trade unionist and I did not speak up. I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the communist. I did not speak up. Then they came for the Jews. Then they came for the Catholics. Then they came for me, and there was nobody to speak up. So I said, first they came for the Muslims, and we stood with our Muslim brothers and sisters, and we fought back. But almost immediately after I said that, they came for the anti-war activists. And 24 members of the leading anti-war activists around this country had their homes invaded by the FBI, had computers, phones, records, drawings of their kids, photographs, all sorts of things taken, and they were given subpoenas to appear in a grand jury. They wanted to know some of these people had been on tours to Palestine and other places, wanted to know who they spoke to and so forth, and they weren't going to give up these names. You give up a name of a Palestinian who they spoke to and that Palestinian will disappear. So they weren't going to do that. So this case is still going on. One of those people was Joe Eisenbacher, who is a member of the administrative committee of UNAC. Another one is Sarah Martin. Joe is from Chicago, Sarah's from Minneapolis. She's also on the coordinating committee of UNAC. And all 24 are members of UNAC groups that they've gone after. And then we started seeing more and more. Ralph is going to talk about what happened with Lynn Stewart, who was also a coordinating committee member of UNAC. You know, we've seen that. We've seen the NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act of 2012, where they say you can arrest anybody you want without charges, even American citizens, as we heard. We've seen other things, them going after whistleblowers, Chelsea Manning. And think of what Lynn did. Lynn published a press release, something lawyers do for their clients all the time. But they told her she couldn't do it. They didn't want her to have a real defense. But why are they afraid of a press release? Why are they afraid of what Chelsea Manning said? He did not reveal any government secrets. He did not reveal any military secrets. It was not secret codes or maneuvers of military troops. They were just things that were embarrassing, immoral, and illegal on the part of this government, and so they classified it. They classify everything they can. And so what does that mean for those of us who are activists who want to speak against those things and speak up against them? We could be committing crimes. We could be talking about classified things. So they go after Snowden. They go after people they went after The Guardian in Britain, you know. So they had to destroy their hard drives. Democracy is dying. When you have imperialism overseas, you cannot have democracy here, and we don't. And so the anti-war movement is fighting these battles. We're fighting against the wars abroad and what we call the wars at home. And a lot of that is what comes under the guise of the war on terror. It has a domestic component too. And all of this, and all of the security state and the surveillance state, including stop and frisk and stand your ground, and all of that comes under what they are doing. And so the anti-war movement needs to stand with civil libertarians, we need to stand with the Muslim community, and we need to speak, we all need to speak against this. These are all of our struggles now. And the one thing this can do is it can bring us all together, no matter what area we work on, because these things affect all of us. And when we all come together, that's the way we can win. Thank you.